everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for everybody who's watching on Zoom, and thanks especially to Todd for being with us today from the Skateboard Hall of Fame. Todd's knowledge is incomparable. We're so thrilled that you were part of planning Vehicles of Expression, and we're just so excited to hear what you're going to tell us today. So thank you, and without further ado.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Emily. I really like this place. I didn't know there was a craft museum, and like I said before, when Emily first reached out to me, I was like, I don't know, what's a craft museum? And then as I thought about it, it clicked that skateboarding started out as a craft. You couldn't just go buy a skateboard. So just to introduce myself, my name's Todd Huber. I'm a 60-year-old dude, grew up here in California. My brother and I were always just rambunctious young kids, and we like to jump our bikes and ride roller skates and just do everything that the young boys do. And my mom brought home this roller derby skateboard, 1970, so I was 5 years old. And every Friday when I was in kindergarten, we had show and tell. And I brought it to show and tell, and the teacher, she was angry because nobody had really seen it before. And so everybody wanted to mess around and play with it. And I remember my teacher was like, don't bring that back here anymore. I was like a 5-year-old kid, but for whatever reason, I was like, really? Oh, you don't want me to bring it back? And that means this is something about this thing. And so that was kind of my first experience with skateboarding. And that was 1970, and the wheels were still clay. And it was a really challenge. If you've ever ridden a board with clay wheels, it's a challenge. There's no grip, they're very hard, and they vibrate your feet. But we stuck with it, and it was fun, and we kept riding our bikes and kept skating. And as I got older, I got better boards as time went by. And because of that, I've been a lifelong skateboarder. And I want to thank not only my mom, but my parents in general. My parents were really cool. My dad was an attorney, and he was very suit and tie kind of guy. I was going to say not fun, but he was fun, but his work wasn't very fun. But thanks to them, whatever we liked, they liked. And my mom gave it her best. She put me in piano lessons. And after a couple months, I was like, Mom, this just sucks. It's no fun. And she's like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, we just like to skateboard. And my grandfather, randomly, owned a roller rink in Bakersfield. It's still open. He built it in 1954, and it's called Skateland. And it's still there, and it's really cool. And so we would spend a lot of time, on spring break, my parents would drive us up to Bakersfield, and my brother and I would spend a lot of time roller skating at my grandfather's roller rink. And when we were in our teens, a skate park opened up there called the Endless Wave. And we showed up with our skateboards to my grandpa's house, and he's like, why would you want to go there? He instantly was nervous that it was his competition because he was the roller rink. But he's like, okay, I'll take you guys, because I think he really wanted to check out the competition. And when we got there, my brother's board was made out of aluminum, and they wouldn't let him use it. They're like, you're going to damage the course with that aluminum board. So my brother and I had to share a board, and it sucked because we had to share a board. And as we left, my grandpa was like, I give it 2 years. That was kind of what I remember him saying under his breath, and he was right. It closed after 2 years. So that's kind of how I became a skateboarder. It's just one of those things my whole life that's kept me active. And there have been times in my life when I stopped skateboarding. When I went to college to be an attorney like my dad, which thank God it didn't work out, I became a broke skateboarder, but I have fun. And to me, to be worried a little bit about money but have fun every day was way better than my dad, who had the really nice car and was going on vacations. He didn't have any fun though, so I kind of chose the fun route. And so that's me. But the history of skateboarding, what's really a trip about skateboarding and why I was excited to be here today is, unlike other things, like in baseball, everyone knows Abner Doubleday invented baseball in whatever year in New York. And in skateboarding, nobody knows when it was invented, who was the first skateboarder, or where that was. And it's all mystery. Nobody knows. And that's my favorite part. Because of that, there's all these what I call fish stories. Oh, back in '49, I was on a board, or people like to tell fish stories. So I thought, I'm going to be coming to give a talk about the beginning of skateboarding. I'm going to reach out to the oldest skateboarders I know and try and get their fish stories and see what they had to say about it. And luckily, one of them here, Chris, don't mean to call you old, but Chris Dawson is here with us. He is a Skateboard Hall of Famer, the only Hall of Famer here, inducted in 2019. And he just told me today that he was in a competition in the early 60s. He'd been skateboarding before that. He said his dad made him a scooter, because skateboarding started as scooters. And the top broke off because they were really rough on the boards. And at first he thought, oh, wow, there goes the end of our fun. But then they kept trying it without the top, kind of like in Back to the Future, that's what happens. And it ended up being the thing. And he said it wasn't very much after that they were racing down the hills and just really enjoying just the skateboard itself. And then he entered a competition, and that was in 1957. And then fast forward like 4 or 5 years, and he entered a competition in Pacific Palisades. And he said the top 3 in the men's and the women's got invited to be on the Hobie exhibition team. What were you in the top 3? 1, 2, or 3?
I was number 1.
Number 1, okay. Awesome. And well, because of that, he got invited. Did Hobie Alter himself ask you to be on the team? So Hobie Alter was a famous surfboard manufacturer. Skateboarding had just started. And it wasn't until 1962 that you could actually buy a skateboard. Until then, the skateboards were all made out of roller skates. This is a good example of one. I literally just took it off the wall before I came here. And typically, you can see the front of the roller skate and then the back. And in the back, there was usually a heel cup that it had leather straps. And I can see on this one, they broke off the cup. It just snapped off. But there's some where they flatten it, and there's some where they just cut a notch into the wood and leave the heel cup. But typically the front looks like the front and the back looks like the back. And they have metal wheels, which are still roll great, but they have a great patina to them. The reason I brought this particular one is because I just really dug the art on it. Like the graphics, the moon eyes are cool. And at first, I was like, KS plus WC. That's a typical thing that like, either, I don't know, I used to do it too. So I was going to say that a girl would write, but I used to do it too if I had a crush on somebody. And I was like, I wonder who KS and WC. And I looked a little closer, I saw in the yellow, it says Kathy and Wade. So I'm like, oh, Kathy and Wade. That's the K and the W. And then it said, you meet the nicest people on a do-it-yourself skateboard. Holy cesspool. I flushed Batman down the toilet. And then here they kept track of their wipeouts. They had 7 wipeouts, it says. And I think this was one of the ones that we originally were going to bring here. And I think we just got so carried away. It didn't end up here. But there's some other really cool ones here. There's one where the nails are all bent over. There's a couple where the nails are bent over. And there's even one on this wall over here that's made out of a chunk of furniture. And there's a name for that furniture makers use for the thing where the slot would go in. And you can see it on that board. And I just love the folk artness of these. And as a collector, so I started collecting in 89, I quit smoking cigarettes, and I started collecting as a hobby. And I started with bikes. But one thing I noticed when I was collecting skateboards was all the other collectors that I used to were my rivals. I'd see them at the flea markets. They never bought these. They only wanted the ones that they had heard of or had logos or graphics. And these were like the cheapest ones. And I was so intrigued by them because every one was one of a kind to me. And as a collector, the best part about collecting skateboards is because this is the only one of this board. So I have it. So like nobody can get them all. If you were a Hot Wheels collector, it's possible to get every Hot Wheel because they're all made by Mattel and you knew which ones the graphics were. They have books about them. But with skateboarding, since for like the first 10 years, they were homemade. They're all one of a kind. That's my favorite part as a collector. There's really no end to it, which is good, but it's also kind of sketchy because it makes me never want to stop looking for boards because you never know what you're going to find. And I always equate it to fishing because, it's like you pack a lunch, you drive all the way to the lake, you get up early, and you might come home with nothing, but you might be like the legend of the lake and come home with like the biggest monster. You just never know. And if you follow my Instagram, you'll see still every Sunday, I still go out looking for boards. And it's just such a fun hobby to look for boards. So I wanted to just share, when I reached out to the older skaters, like Chris, I reached out to a guy named Jim Fitzpatrick, who's the chairman of our board of directors, and he told me he was 78. And I think that's similar to Chris's age, up north of 70. And I asked him, what's your earliest memory of skateboarding? And he said he was in Point Loma, California, and his neighbor's dad had made 4 skateboards out of 2 sets of roller skates and gave one to him. And he said after that he was hooked. And so that was the early, and Chris, same thing, you told me 1957 was your first experience. And then I asked Brian Logan, and Brian Logan was the oldest brother of the Logan family. In the 70s, they were known as the first family of skateboarding. And it was Brian, Bruce, Brad, and Robin. And then their mom, Barbara, was known as Mother Skateboard. And he told me his earliest memory was 1959. He grew up in Hermosa Beach. And his brother, Bruce, he said once they got these homemade skateboards, they were hooked, and they were skateboarders for life. And so Chris, if you started in 57, that means you're like a 68 years of skateboarding in your life, right? Yeah, that's insane to me. Like I was -8 when you were skateboarding, and I love that. And I know there's people older than you. You happen to be the oldest, one of my elder statesmen, I guess, to put it in a good way, that I can talk to as my friend. But there's guys even older than you probably that skate, and it's sort of a dying breed. No, I don't want you to die, but I just know there's skateboarders that were older than Chris that have already passed away. And this is the first year in the Hall of Fame when we haven't honored somebody from the 1960s. And we've been honoring people for 17 years. And this is the very first year where we started with the 1970s, because all the superstars of your generation have been recognized. And we don't want to, the Hall of Fame, one thing with the Hall of Fame, it's not contrived. We're not going to just pick someone for the sake of having someone from the 60s. We've recognized them all. I wanted to just go back to when I was saying that nobody knew who, where, or when it was invented. I reached out to it. Oh, one thing is, in this book that we just put out for the Hall of Fame, I just got it yesterday, and I was reading it last night, and I literally just unloaded them. And there's a guy named Jeff Tatum, who's getting in the Hall of Fame in the 1970s, picture of him right there. And he's a really trippy guy. But I read this quote, and I thought, he's exactly right. And he was credited for inventing a trick like the J slide, or I don't even know what the trick was, but there's one trick that they gave him credit for inventing. And when we asked him about it, his quote says, "Does any one person invent anything?" And I thought, yeah, that's a really great point. Because even like, I don't know, with Alexander Graham Bell had Watson or whatever it wasn't just one dude in a room thinking it up. It's usually a collaborative effort. And I think that's the same with skateboarding. Just as Chris said, he started in 1957 in Santa Monica. The other guy, Jim, started in 1957 in Point Loma. And you guys didn't even know each other. And so you could each claim that you invented it, but did one person really invent it? And I think that's the coolest mystery that nobody really knows. And because of that, people like to talk. So my mentor, his name's Dale Smith. He's got in the Hall of Fame last year. Everyone calls him the Sausage Man because he had a real bad wipeout. And everyone said, dude, your fingers look like sausage, because he had crashed so bad. And it stuck. And they call him Sausage Man. And he doesn't get mad when you call him that. He owns it. But he's the guy I look up to. When I first started collecting, I didn't buy the older board. I always bought these, but I didn't buy the ones from the 60s, like the Hobies and the ones that are on the ground, because I was trying to relive my childhood. And somebody said, oh no, Dale Smith will pay for those. You should start buying those. So then I started buying them, and I'd see him at the swap meet, and I would see which way he was going, and I would jump one row ahead of him. And it was amazing technique, because he didn't know it. And like, we'd go through the whole swap meet, and he would be behind me the whole time. And I'd get like 2 or 3 boards, and then we'd go home, and this was before the internet. He would call me, he's like, not much out there today, was there? And I was just giggling inside because I got 3 boards, and he never even knew it. It was awesome. But now we're friends, and I really do consider him to be, my mentor, the guy that I used to always ask about the older stuff, because that was his specialty. And so I asked him yesterday, when was skateboarding invented? And I know the answer. He doesn't know. I know even that my mentor doesn't know. But he came back with, it was invented in 1910 in El Paso, Texas. I was like, what? When did this happen? And so I called him up. I said, come on, Dale, what do you mean? He goes, well, I've got a picture of a guy in 1910 in El Paso, and it's not a scooter, he's on a skateboard. I go, yeah, but what's his name? I have to talk tomorrow and say how skateboarding started. You can't. He goes, I'm going to find out. I know what high school he went to. And I'm all, dude, but even then, we can't give him credit for inventing skateboarding in El Paso, Texas. So I asked AI about it, and they're like, there's no evidence of skateboarding in El Paso before 1977. And I called him back. I go, hey, according to AI, he goes, AI doesn't know anything. I got the proof. And it sparked a really funny debate with myself and my mentor. And he might be right. He probably does have that picture. And I don't know how he knows 1910, but I brought along this magazine because the oldest thing I've ever found, and this isn't even skateboarding, and they have the page in there. This is a magazine called The Women's Home Companion, and it's from 1913. And it smells old, like, you know that smell like when you walk into a thrift store? I think it's really mothballs, but it's just an old person smell. My grandma's house used to smell like that. And, right? You guys all know the smell. If you want, you can smell it. And if you ever watch my videos, for some reason, I always smell, whenever I open something, I always give it a smell. And it's not because I want the old smell. It's just because I'm just curious. It's just part of the senses that you evaluate things with. And this smells old. And I marked the page because there's a page in here, and it's called the new roller skate mobile. And this magazine, by the way, it was geared towards moms or women with things to do, recipes. This was how you can build, described for every boy to make. And it was an article that a mom could share with her kids on how to make a scooter. And what's cool is, the way I got this was somebody walked in and gave me the page, which is on display. I loaned it to the museum here, but I brought the whole magazine because it's more effective, I think, when you see that it actually was in this big magazine. But I like that it talks about a very fast, bright blue machine was called the Blue Rocket, and others were called the Red Bird, the Flyer, the Yellow Zip, the Go Boy, the Black Lightning, and the White Wings. And posters announced the races were up to a week beforehand, and the names of the cars and their owners appeared in large letters. And I just love that they were having competitions in 1913. And I think that's really cool. And so that's the oldest thing I've ever found. And I was so disappointed when Dale said 1910. I was like, damn, he got me by 3 years. I was hoping he would have said 1914. I could have, oh, hang on, buddy. But this really doesn't qualify, and he knows about this, and to him, he doesn't consider this skateboarding. He just considers this a scooter. But if you come to our museum, and even here, you'll see that at the beginning of our exhibit, it starts with scooters, because that's really how it started. And this, to me, is proof. And somebody sent me a long time ago, and I don't know, I didn't really even follow up on it, a photo of the John Muir Museum. And I think, and pardon me for not knowing, but I think John Muir was an explorer that walked in Colorado, or he did like a trail in Colorado. And he has a museum somewhere. And somebody at some point sent me a photograph of what looked like an ironing board with 4 wheels on it. And they're like, I found the first skateboard. And they had a year to it. I don't know what it was. And I thought, is that a skateboard? And he's like, yeah, but it's got 4 wheels. And it looked more like a dolly or something. So there's a ton of weird, back to my thing about no one really knowing, there's all these claims and fish tales, as I call it. And I don't think we're ever going to know. I just don't think it's possible for somebody at this point to step forward and say, my dad was the guy. And I shouldn't say that. It is possible. You never know. Somebody could find an old shoebox full of photos and they could be documented or whatever. But I think by now we would have already known it. And to me, I love the mystery part of it. It wasn't until 1962 that you could actually buy a skateboard at a store. And so Chris, the oldest guys I know are Chris, he started in 57. So that means there was at least 5 years of homemade boards like this one. But in 1962, the first skateboard came out and it was considered a toy. And it was called another debate I've had with Dale quite often is there was 2 that came out in the same year, the roller derby number 10 and the ski skate. And they have them both here on display. But Dale confirmed to me last night that the patent for the ski skate was taken out in 1959. And in 1960, roller derby had an ad that they were going to make a skateboard. So because of that, he claims the ski skate was the first one, which was in Culver City, California. And one of the claims that people make about skateboarding, AI included, is that it was started when surfers, when the waves were flat. And I just totally disagree because I grew up like 20 miles from the ocean. So the waves were always flat. It had nothing to do with surfing. We always wanted to be like surfers. And so, again, nobody really knows where it was. I don't think it was invented by surfers. It could have been, but nobody knows. It just, the thing that AI also said, or I've also known, is it just became part of the surf culture because it is that same kind of style and movement. And I had a friend who was trying to learn to skate recently, and I told her, and it wasn't this girl, but another girl that I'm friends with, I told her, because I know she's skating, but style matters. Like, it matters. You can't just be all stiff. And one thing, if you ever notice the old pictures of skateboarders, they're all stiff and they don't have style. But the reason they get a pass is because it was really scary. And the wheels were very slippery. So they were really like, I mean, I tried yesterday myself to ride a board with clay wheels, and I guarantee I had no style because I didn't want to fall. And it was, you know, just one flick of your toe or your heel, and you were going to be on the ground. And so I give them a pass because they were just really just being cautious. And that's why they didn't have style. And so if you see a stylish skateboarder from the 60s, give them credit because it's hard to be stylish on really crappy gear. And we're very lucky that all the skaters from it wasn't until 73 that urethane wheels came out. So everybody that rode a skateboard before then, we really owe them a debt of gratitude, I think is an expression, because it wasn't as fun as it is or was when the equipment changed. And and they still did it. And thank God, otherwise there probably wouldn't be skateboarding now. And I always talk when I give a tour of the museum, there really was 5 basic things that changed skateboarding and made it what it is today. And the first one was the kicktail, like having a kicktail on the back. Any board, and even boards of today have a kick nose, but all the early boards like this are flat. So the kicktail was one of the first inventions. The urethane wheel, which was rubber, and I had an older customer come in and tell me that he was at the peak of his childhood skateboarding. He was at the peak of his childhood as a skateboarder when the urethane wheel came out. And he said it opened up his world. It made it from him just skating in his driveway to being able to go all the way across town and back. And he said it just opened up his whole life to transportation. And he realized, well, I can skateboard all day long now because I'm not going to die if I hit a rock or whatever. And it was cool to hear that. And I hear that a lot. And when you come to my museum and you look at the wall and it's an evolution, you can kind of gauge somebody's age by what part of the wall they gravitate to. And if they're like older, they're always here. And if they're younger, they're always like the Tony Hawk or whatever it is. And so the 2 inventions so far, the kicktail, the urethane wheel, the next very important invention for skateboarding was precision bearings. If you look at a board, these have little hubcaps, but if you look at an older board, you can see the balls and you can hear them. And a lot of times they would fall out and you'd have like a one derelict wheel and they're very hard to bring back to life. So a lot of times when I find old boards from the 70s, one wheel doesn't work. And that's what preserved the board. So kicktail, urethane wheel, precision bearings. The next big one was grip tape. You need some kind of traction on top. The smooth just makes it really hard. And there was a board from the 60s, and I don't think we have one here, but it was called the Action Traction. And somebody had put grooves throughout the whole board in an attempt for traction. And I thought that was cool. And the other attempt was carpet. And they do have the shag carpet. You can see it right there where they put shag carpet on top. And somebody knew this sucks with no grip. What can we do about that? And I've seen sandpaper glued on there. I've seen the grooves, but the carpet's the coolest one. And it's almost impossible to find a carpet board that survived, just because the glue didn't hold or they're just delicate or whatever. I really like those. And then the final invention that matters for modern day skateboarding is the kick nose. And if you look at a modern day skateboard, there's a nose and a tail. And the reason that the nose matters is because for a trick that wasn't not invented until like the late 70s, the ollie, you need that kick nose. So your front foot can scoop that nose to make the board pop off the ground. And even though I can't ollie, and that was before my time, that's important to modern day skateboarding. So and there are other inventions that were important, but to me, those are the 5 things we couldn't have skate. Oh, look at that. Look at this custom service here at the Craft and American Museum. Thank you, but this is cool because it's, thanks Victoria. I'm glad you brought me this one because even more unique, one of the trends when you made a homemade board was to make it hot rod style. It's hard to tell, but the back wheels were bigger than the front wheels. And I don't know how they did that, if they got another pair of skates and switched it so the big ones, so they could take the big ones and put it on 2 boards. And can you see how this one's bigger? And the other thing that's cool about this one is they put masking tape on here to try and make it a smoother ride. You can barely see it left over, and that wasn't a bad idea actually. And then because they put the big wheels only on the back, they did this what they call the wheel well, where they so it wouldn't get wheel bite. Now today they call it wheel bite. And you can see they took some kind of a chisel and chiseled out this part so that they wouldn't get the wheel bite. This sport's got a lot of going on because of it. The other cool thing a lot of the early boards didn't have, like this one, was the trucks weren't adjustable. There's just a chunk of rubber in there, and you didn't have a choice on how tight or loose it was. But on this board that has, these are called Chicago trucks. They're made by the Chicago Roller Skate Company. And it actually says Chicago on here, or it doesn't, but these are Chicago. You could tighten the trucks, and it had a rubber bushing, and you could adjust how tight they were. And that was a huge thing compared to the early roller skateboards that just had a chunk of rubber. And eventually that rubber would fall out, and your whole truck would be kind of like that, like this one needs to be tightened. And somebody walked into my museum with this, and they're like, would you give me $40 for it? And I'm like, yes, I would. And it's hard. And I have 3 carpet boards. This is the coolest one because it has this multicolored shag carpet. And people always comment, and they always want to touch it. And at first I'm like, don't touch it. And I'm like, who cares? Just touch it. Like, the thing about me, I'm pretty casual. Like, I don't get angry about too much. Yeah, this is a really cool board. And someone painted the bottom as well. Yeah, that's a really good one. Well, what else do I want to talk about, guys? Because I can just keep rambling for a long time. Let me think about this just for a minute. I got a couple other stories I wanted to tell you guys. Let me just look at my notes for a second, if you don't mind, and see what else I may have forgot here. Yeah, so this one, my notes here says California is a mid-20th century invention, not an early 1900s Texas one. Skateboarding doesn't have a single clean invention moment or one inventor. It evolved organically, but we can pin down the most widely accepted and origins pretty clearly. California, surfers wanted something to do and the waves were flat. That's like the general consensus. I fight against that all the time because I was only a surfer if like mom had the day off. Like we couldn't just go to the beach. But they did call it sidewalk surfing. And if you look at a lot of the early records, like Jan and Dean had one called Sidewalk Surfing or Bust Your Buns. And they talked a lot about the sidewalk surfing aspect of it. I think that's really cool. Yeah, there was no standard. No standard. A lot of them were used 2x4s, but it didn't have to be a 2x4. A lot of people use fence posts, or there's a chunk of furniture in there. I've seen some made out of plexiglass. It doesn't really matter. I think everybody was trying to sort of come up with the next or what the best thing was. The very first place in the world you could buy a skateboard is still a shop today. It's called Valsurf, and they're in North Hollywood. They have 4 or 5 stores, but that's when it changed from a toy, and they always compared skateboarding with the hula hoop as a fad. It's just a fad, just like hula hoop, and there's no, like hula hoop's not in the Olympics, for example. And skateboarding, it kind of like, well, it definitely outlasted the hula hoop, but it kind of like, all the naysayers had to sort of like, eat crow, so to speak, because now it's an Olympic sport. But before 1962, they considered it a fad or a toy. And in 1962, Bill Richards, who owned Valsurf at the time, he passed away now, but his family still owns it. He approached Hobie Alter, who's the guy that recruited Chris to be on his team. And Hobie was a surfboard manufacturer who made boards out of planks of wood. And he said, why can't you make a smaller one, a replica of your surfboard? And there's one here. If you, after the talk, you'll see it on the ground, the Hobie, that Hobie Alter himself made. And we can make a replica, and then I'll call Chicago, the roller skate company, and try to just buy the fronts that didn't have the heel cup on the back. And they were successful. They were able to buy a bunch of them that just had the front, the rounded point, which they put on the back and the front. And so the very first skate shop in the world, with 1966, the boards until 66 were just toys, was called Valsurf. And they're in the Hall of Fame because of that, because they took it more serious. They took it more like sidewalk surfing. And they're also, I got to take note, they're also in the valley. They weren't at the beach. They were in the valley. They're called Valsurf, and they were the first skate shop. And I use that a lot sometimes when people ask, why is the Skateboard Museum in Simi Valley? And I say, oh, that's where skateboarding started. The first shop's Valsurf. We weren't surfers, we were skateboarders, and we didn't want to be like surfers. I mean, we did want to be like surfers, but we knew we couldn't, so we went to skateboarding. And Valsurf boards are really, they had their own board too, and they weren't all Hobies. They had some that said Valsurf, and they're really collectible and rare and hard to find. And I have a couple of them. They're kind of like holy grails, so to speak. And some people ask me, what board's your holy grail? Like, what board don't you have? Because if there's a board I haven't seen, I really consider it rare, other than the homemade boards, because there's plenty I haven't seen. But there's a board that I've seen pictures of, which had the Beatles on it. And it's had like all 4 Beatles on it. And there's a Beatles memorabilia book that talks about all the things you could buy if you're a Beatles fan. Record cases, combs, wigs, and there's a skateboard in there. And I'm like, I've never seen one. And even my mentor, Dale Smith, doesn't have one. And I asked him about it. He's like, well, I know where the factory where they made them. I'm like, do you have one or not, dude? Like, he always gets into this. And I was like, I know where the factory is too. It was in Norfolk, Virginia, but nobody has one. And somebody sent me a picture of them holding one up one time, but I felt like they just made it. They saw the book, and they're like, I could recreate that. So I've never seen one in real life. And that's the one that I'd really like to get someday. One of what I would consider one of my holy grails. I just got to, sometimes I have to slow my brain down because I get so, and it's not on purpose, but I have this passion inside of me for skateboarding that I didn't try to get. It just has happened over the years. And one thing I should mention is I'm just a fan. Like I'm not some like ex-pro or great skateboarder, and I didn't want to ever be like a historian. It just sort of by default, this is my 29th year having a skateboarding museum, and over the years I've just picked up a lot of information, but that wasn't my goal. I really just wanted to like pay tribute to the people that enabled us when I got older to be able to skateboard. And that's how it started. So sometimes people ask me, who won the first this or who won the first that? And I might know it, but I don't really want to claim to be like an expert. And I guess that's kind of what lets me off the hook about the origins of skateboarding is nobody really can say where, when, or who. And I love that. I'm trying to think of my first memory of somebody else skateboarding, but it was just when my mom brought home that board. When people come to my museum, there's a board, I should have brought one called the Black Knight. And it's like the most, when people come in, they always say, I bet you don't have a Black Knight. And I want to say everybody had a Black Knight. Of course, I got like 30 of them. But I think people say that because they had one and they were hoping to see it. So when you come to the museum, right there, front and center, I put the Black Knight because people always come looking for that board. And they were, I don't know if you remember Thrifties, but the Black Knight was $9.95 at Thrifties. And that's why everybody had it. And they were crappy boards, but everyone had it. And it's just like the biggest memory of skateboarding. And the one thing I wanted to mention too was it wasn't just in California, let alone America. And in the 1960s, they made great skateboards in Australia. And there was one in particular called the Surfa, S-U-R-F-A, Surfer. Maybe that's their accent, the Surfa Sam, which is a cool one. And they're really hard to get here in America because they're from Australia. And in 1992, I went to Australia and I hired a cab driver to take me to what's called, they call thrift stores op shops, like opportunity shops. And I went to Surfer's Paradise where all the surfers were, and I hired this cab driver to take me to all the op shops. I'm coming home with a skateboard. And I started in '89, so I was like 3 years into it. I'd heard about the Surfer Sam, and I went to all these op shops, like 10 of them. I made the guy wait outside, just wait outside, I'll just be a minute. And like I spent the whole day and I found one board and it was like from the 70s. It wasn't what I wanted. And they're really hard to get. And I finally found one. This guy had an old movie theater that he had an ambulance in there. Like it was just like this cool spot. You know, he had old bicycles and just my style. And there was this whole wall of all these Surfer Sams. I'm like, oh, I found the guy. And he had skim boards and surfboards. And I was like, I found it. And I was like, oh, hey, how much are the skateboards? And he's like, oh, they're not for sale, mate. I'm not selling those. I spend my whole life looking for them. Like, oh, I came all the way from America just to bring home a board, you know? And like, he's like, no, I'm not going to sell them. I was like, God, the closest I got was like to see him on the wall. And he had a lot of them. And I'm thinking, man, you can't just part with one of them. So I didn't get them. And then ironically, a couple years later, I started working for an Australian company. And I was in the surf industry and it was called Gorilla Grip. And it was like traction for surfboards. And the guy that ran it, I told him, do you ever find old skateboards? He goes, oh, I got my old Surfer Sam. Do you want it? I'm like, yes. So I finally got my first Surfer Sam. If you ever come to the museum, I'll show it to you. And since then, I've got like 4 or 5 of them. But I like the boards from other countries because they're really hard to get. The common ones here, like the red roller derby or the ski skate, and a lot of the Hobie, they're more common. But you never just walk to the swap meet and find the Surfer Sam. And if you do, you're like, oh, Surfer Sam. And now because of the internet, almost always the person knows these are like $1,000. You know, I'm not going to sell it for $40. And as a collector, for like the first 15 years of being a collector, I had this $40 rule. If something was more than $40, I wouldn't buy it. And I remember I went to the Santa Monica airport, had this really cool swap meet. They still have it. It sucks now, but it used to be really good. And this guy had a con, and I have one here on display. It's got a red circle, and it's a con. And I didn't have one at the time. And he wanted $50. And I was like, I'm not going to get it. I said, would you do 40? Because that was my limit, $40. He goes, 45 and you got a deal. And I didn't buy it. I'm like, nope, I'm not buying it. If you won't go to 40, and I left it behind. Now it's like a $400 board all day. And like, there were several boards that I left behind over $5. And it's okay. I mean, at this point, if you've, like I know like the ladies from the museum have seen my back room. Like, if I never get even one more skateboard, I'll be okay. You know, it's okay. But it's still, I just go back to what I said about fishing. You just never know what's going to come out of the lake, you know? And like I say, if you want to see my experiences, I've been recording a lot of my swap meet negotiations with people. And it's been pretty interesting because they don't know like anything about me, and they'll start to tell me, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. This is like a rare board from so-and-so, and I just want to say, dude, you are so wrong. Like, but I'm pretty polite. I'm like, oh, okay, well, hopefully you want 300, well, hopefully you get every penny for it. And then I said, but the wheels are wrong. And he yanked it out of my hand like so rudely. And he didn't know I was videoing it. I videoed the whole thing, and when I put it online, I had all these comments. Man, you should have told him you're from the museum. Like, why didn't you tell him? You're too nice to that guy. And then the next week, I saw him again at every Sunday. There's a different collectible swap meet. And a lot of the sellers go to different ones. Like tomorrow's the Rose Bowl. And so I saw him one week, then I saw him at the Rose Bowl, and there was the skateboard. I was like, I knew you weren't going to sell it. So I go, oh, hey, look, my old friend. And I think he saw the video because he was so friendly to me. He's like, oh, hey, buddy. He's like, could we meet halfway? Let's do 150. And I was like, oh, wow, it went from 300 to 150 like in 1 week. And it still wasn't even worth 150. And I was like, oh, I'll think about it. He goes, oh, you better act quick. Somebody's going to snatch it up. And like the next week I went and it was gone. So somebody did buy it, but it wasn't me. So and I just was going through a lot of my boards, and I just realized the last thing I really do need is another skateboard. So if you see my videos and I leave a board behind because it's overpriced, it's probably because I have it. And I just don't really want to spend like $300 on like the third board or whatever. Well, instead of me just continuing to talk, does anyone have any questions or want to know anything about skateboarding or me or anything else?
When you mentioned that Val's was selling the first skateboard in '66, is there any coincidence to Vans coming out in '66?
I don't think so. I think it's just a coincidence. I think it's just a coincidence. Yeah.
Could you just repeat the questions?
Yes. So this gentleman asked, was Val Surf sold the first real skateboard in 1966, and also the same year Vans shoes started, which are like kind of known as like the skate brand of shoes. I think it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was just a really popular time for surf culture. And in 1965, skateboarding was on the cover of Life magazine. I should have brought it. And it had Patty McGee, who was the very first woman inducted into the Skateboarding Hall of Fame in 2010. And she was on the cover of Life magazine doing a handstand, and it just said, skateboards, the craze and menace. And so by 1965, America was already pissed off. And Chris said the same thing when he went to high school. He was an outcast for being a skater, right? Like, and you, like the jocks would make fun of you or whatever. Like and it's the same now. It's the same now. I get hassled by jocks all the time, and I'm 60. So like, it's just a separate thing. Not everybody. The thing about skateboarding that's really cool, and I even today own a skate park, and I just did a birthday party for all these young kids, and skateboarding is really hard. But what's cool about skateboarding is you can do it with all your buddies and have a great time, or you can be completely alone and have a great time. And like I remember we had a ping pong table, and every once in a while I'd try and play by myself against the thing, and it sucks. It sucks. You're good for like 5 minutes at the most, but I could skateboard by myself all day long. And I love that about skateboarding. You can do it alone or with your buddies, and that's what's really cool. And the other thing about skateboarding that's really awesome is the fact that it's really hard. It makes it so challenging because you can't just jump on it and be good. You truly have to work at it. And when you see others progress and do things that you haven't been able to do, it shows you it is possible. That guy's younger than me and he's doing it. It just makes you want to do more and more. Like I remember when I was younger, I'd go skiing and I was struggling to ski, and I'd see a kid like that big fly by me. Or kids, I'm using kids because they could pick up Spanish like that, and it was so hard for me. And I think with skateboarding, it's the same. Kids, they get obsessed with trying to figure it out. They know it's doable, but how come I can't just do it? And because of that, you'll come back tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and it just makes it addicting. It really is. And as I get older, and actually throughout my whole life, it's been one of the best things to keep me moving. Just to keep me moving and not just sitting there or behind a desk or whatever. And I just feel really lucky. And I do. I always thank my parents because I have friends whose parents were like, no, you can't skate. You're going to be a pro baseball player. I built you the whole batting cage in our backyard. And it was like, dang, he really wanted to skate, and I always give my parents credit because if they wouldn't have supported it, I wouldn't be here today talking to you guys. I'd probably be like an attorney somewhere, like wearing a tie or whatever. And like I can definitely rock a tie, but it's just not. Only at like a funeral or a wedding will you see me with a tie on, basically. So yeah, that's about it. Any other questions? I'd love to talk more. I'm serious. That's it. Come on.
How many boards do you have?
That's a good question. Somebody asked me that yesterday, I think, and I don't know. I think about 5,000 boards. I think. And a lot of them are in boxes. And I don't know if you can count just the deck as a board. I do. I count them all. But because of the space that I'm located in is temporary, like I know I'm going to have to move, I haven't really unpacked. So a lot of my boards are just kind of waiting in the wings. I hope to someday find a place that I can land and unpack and like be more comfortable. Right now I feel like literally like I could get like a 30-day notice and it would be really hard to move all my stuff. But a lot of boards, a lot. And I don't know why I can't help. I'm a really, my personality is all or nothing. Like I'm a really addictive guy. And I just got addicted to skateboarding. And like there could be way worse, and I have been addicted to way worse things, but I'm really glad that I focused on something that I feel like it matters. There's a pro skater named Steve Caballero, like really famous Bones Brigade skater, like probably about my age, and I was giving him a tour of my back room, which isn't open to everybody, and there's kind of like an overwhelming amount of skateboards. You're like, God, this guy is like insane. And Steve Caballero, I saw him saying it to himself, but he said to me, his way of saying it nice was, do you have any kids? And I was thinking, no, why? He goes, well, what's going to happen when you die? Like, where's all this stuff going to go when you die? And it was and I've been thinking about that ever since. And I can't wait to see him again because I want to let him know that really sparked my thought. Because I have this dream or goal of leaving it behind somewhere so that it can stay I would like to leave a legacy in that regards. Miss in the back.
Have you ever made your own board?
I didn't make my own board, but when I was like in high school, the bottom of my board got all scraped up, and I was like, I'm gonna make my own company, and I sanded it all off, and my company is called Evil Eye because I always looked at the eye on the dollar bill. There's like an eye, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make my thing called Evil Eye Skates, and it's this eye that's looking at you. And so I've been recently looking through old family photos, but I can't find a picture of it. But I can see it in my brain. It was pretty cool. But that's the closest I ever got because when I was, by the time I was really into skateboarding, or even first started skateboarding, homemade skateboards weren't really a thing unless you were in wood shop. And there's a bunch of people that made boards in wood shop because the teacher was cool with it. Like it was something you could do instead of a bowl. We always had to make bowls. But it was like, oh, we can make skateboards? And I didn't personally make them, but a lot of people in my wood shop, I don't even think they have wood shop anymore. I think kids in a way are getting burned, but we had wood shop and we had metal shop. Like I had to make a hammer when I was like in 7th grade with like on an anvil. Like I had to heat it up and like, I was like 13, and then after it got hot, we put it in a big bucket of water. And I don't think kids get that same experience now, but I didn't make my own board, but I did paint my own graphics. Thought that was pretty cool. Any other questions? What time is it? Oh, I got 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. That went by really quick. Yes?
So you talk about the different pivotal moments in the craftsmanship of boards.
Yep.
What do you think is happening now? And do you hear any rumblings of what's next?
So I'm a huge skeptic. When it comes to I mentioned those 5 inventions. I don't know if there's a 6th one ever. Somebody came to me with lights that you hook onto the board, these lights. I want to say, dude, don't put 1 nickel into this. Like nobody wants lights on their skateboard, but there are different technologies that have come in the last few years on the boards themselves to last longer. Like Pal Peralta has a board called the Flight Deck. And if you call it carbon fiber, they get mad, but it looks like it has carbon fiber. And there are some new materials that they're using to make the boards themselves last longer because they are pretty, if you skate a lot, a board might only last you a month or 2 months. So there are some new materials that I see, and those boards in my store, a regular board's like $80, and those boards are like $120. But the reason the company says you should buy it is because it's gonna last you the period of 3 boards, not just 1. So that's kind of the only thing I see. Like I don't think there's like some new crazy bearing that's going to come out or some new invention that we haven't heard of. The guy? How's it going? Sky Mariano, Hall of Famer right here. Cool. And I love Guy recently donated, I don't know if it's his whole collection, but a lot of his personal boards. And if you come to the museum, we have this little Guy Mariano wall, and people really, really like that. And I like to tell them that he can look at his Instagram and see the boards that are on the wall that he skated. And there's one board in particular, I don't know the story behind it, but it's got like the Terminator on it. People go crazy for that board. Like it's like the Terminator on this side, and when you go this way, it's like a robot. And it's very well done. But thank you for supporting the museum. I appreciate it. 2018? Yeah. 2018. So that's cool. And 2 Hall of Famers. Guy's an incredible street skater. Like, I don't know Guy that well, but I know he was like a young prodigy. I think maybe he wouldn't. I know he's modest too. But I just saw a recent picture of you when you were really young, like in France or something. Somebody posted.
It was San Francisco, actually, yeah, but it was that park that looked like France.
How old were you? Like 8 or something? You look young.
I was 8 years old.
Yeah, it was cool. That was really cool. So thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. So it's cool. We got 2 Hall of Famers, Chris and Guy, and I appreciate you coming. I really do. The Hall of Fames, it's one of those watch what you wish for kind of things. And the reason that I started the Hall of Fame was I was in Florida, and I was driving between Tampa and Jacksonville, and off the side of the freeway, I saw this giant warehouse that said, "Home to the Water Ski Hall of Fame." And I remember thinking, that's so lame, that water ski has a Hall of Fame. Like, I couldn't even name one water skier. And I thought, how do they have this giant warehouse? And then I realized now it's not lame. There's a huge culture. I was just being ignorant. But it made me think, well, I'm going to start the Skateboarding Hall of Fame because there isn't one. And I had heard Bruce Logan, who was the first person into the Hall of Fame, I heard that he was homeless. I thought, how is Bruce Logan, like the world champion, homeless? We should really be putting a light on him and letting people know that there's people out there that change the world that are, legends, and they're homeless. And that's how it started for me. It was just, I really wanted to honor the people that were being overlooked. And skateboarding was so important to me. And I remember I told myself, I'm going to call 3 people. Tony Hawk, Tony Alva, who was like my Tony Hawk. Like back in the 70s, there was a guy named Tony Alva who was he was a really badass. Like back in the day, he was like a rock star. And then another guy named Jake Phelps who ran the magazine. And I was like, I'm going to ask these guys if they would support it. Because if one of those 3 guys was against it, it probably wouldn't work. And I remember all 3 of them were like, dude, if you think you can pull it off, go for it. And once I got the blessing of those 3 guys, I was like, I'm going to do it. That's Tony Alva, like in the 70s. He just was like an edge pusher, so to speak, like he was like the first guy with his own brand. Like instead of writing for someone else, he's like, I'm the best. He would say it to you, I'm the best. I'm going to make my own skateboards. And everyone thought it was Alwa because it looks like a W-A. But he was a trippy guy. And there's a picture never seen before of 1981, which is awesome. That's Mount Baldy, Upland. But he got crazy and he started getting goth is a word. I think this is like, he started doing all these crazy ads. And he was a trip. Like he was a trippy guy. And like now he's like 67 years old. But he was like truly like back in the 70s, he would run that it wasn't like a costume. That's like how he would dress. And he was just a trip, like just really unique advertising. And like he came out with his own clothing line, which was like plastic. And it's cool, like it's the coolest stuff. And like he's got a cigarette in his mouth. And like he was just the first like, pardon my French, but like first like fuck you guy. Like it's hard to be a rock star. Like I've traveled with rock stars before, and there's some that are like my brother works for Keanu Reeves, and he travels all around, and he said Keanu Reeves is not like a rock star. He's very humble and quiet, but my brother also worked for guys that are like, yeah, well, don't you know me? I'm the lead singer. What do you mean? Like, it's hard to own that. And like even recently, I had a pool at my skate park, and if Tony Alva would snake you, you wouldn't say anything. Like there's only one dude that could snake you, and it was Tony Alva. Even now, like seriously, like I just saw him give a talk, and he said, I learned that your ego is not your amigo. And I'm thinking, when did you learn that, dude? Like a couple months ago, you were all about the ego, Like, and he even has his own socks, and on it says, your ego is not your amigo. I'm thinking, Tony, you got to be honest with yourself, dude. But I recently had the honor of presenting him with a Hall of Fame ring. And when I got to introduce him, I introduced him as the greatest skateboarder of all time. Just because to me, he was the greatest and still is. He still skates. And just those pictures and just the way he was, just really, that's one of the things that got me hooked. And I remember when I was younger, I went to Italy with my grandfather, and I really wanted one of those fedora hats. And I got a great picture with me and my grandpa and my grandpa got me the fedora hat, and I wore it to the skate park. And I was like 14 or 15. And as I walk into the skate park, I thought I was the coolest guys. And all the locals started heckling, hey, it's Tony Alva over there. Like, and thought I was gonna get my ass kicked. It was really embarrassing, and I didn't wear it after that. I couldn't own it like Tony Alva could, you know, like they knew I was like the fake Tony Alva. So he's my hero. I hope I didn't leave anything out about the history or the roots. I just wanted to, I don't know. I think I covered it pretty good. Are there any other questions?
Last question.
Yes.
The weirdest material you've seen used to craft a skateboard?
The weirdest. Well, I think that one that the girl Layla made, where she uses like the bone and camel bone. That's incredible. And I know they're just wall hangers, but when I came here and I talked to her on the opening, and she showed me the technique that she used to create that. There's a word for it. I was blown away. I don't know if that's the weirdest, but it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I think plexiglass is kind of weird. People really like that because you can kind of like look down and watch the road go underneath you if you have a clear skateboard. I thought that was cool. And one of my videos that I did, a guy walked to my shop and he had a board made out of glass. And he tried to sell it to me, and I did this whole video of him trying to sell it to me, and it got like 5.5 million views. So I think in general, when people see a glass skateboard, it kind of really gets you thinking, like, how could someone skate a board made out of glass? What if it hit the ground or if it broke? And I think I've never seen one with wheels, somebody riding it, but I think that'd be pretty unique. There's fiberglass, metal, wood, plexiglass, plastic, anything.
Bad carpet.
Yeah, seriously.
Thank
Pretty
you
cool.
so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. I appreciate it.